Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining today. My name's Carla Thomas. I'm going to have a quick look at the polls results, as I know that whilst you've been waiting, you've been completing polls on where you're from. I'm from the Midlands, and I completed the poll too, and it looks like we are pretty even Stevens, with 20% from the northeast, 20% from the southeast, 20% from London, hi there London, and 20% from other, and only 10% from the Midlands, and I think that must be me, right? And 10% from the southwest. So thanks everybody for completing the polls, and wherever you are in the country today, thanks very much for joining. I'm going to talk to you today about personal brand. This is brought to you by BT Skills for Tomorrow. And in this session, it will be very much a whistle-stop tour. There's nothing complicated that I'm going to be going through today. It will all be fairly common sense. But before we get started, we've got a quick message from Karenza Jennings, and she's the leader of the Skills for Tomorrow programme that's bringing these free training sessions over to you. So if we can cut to the video, please.
Hello and welcome to BT Skills for Tomorrow. I'm Karenza Jennings. I'm BT's Digital Impact Director. I'm really thrilled to welcome you here today. So over lockdown, we've been doing our best to try to help you with the support, tips, guidance and help that we feel that would really benefit you as we move to that very strange environment. Now, obviously, we're now beginning to ease out of lockdown. There's still a huge amount of uncertainty, but we still feel there's a huge role we can play helping support you and all the various small businesses across the whole of the UK as you grapple with the new challenges that the next few months will bring. So working together with Google Digital Garage, with Cisco, with Small Business Britain and with Fresh Business Thinking, we're really proud to bring you this wonderful webinar series. We really hope you're going to learn loads of really interesting things. If you would like to share what you've learned, please do, hashtag BT Skills for Tomorrow. We'd be thrilled if you shared that on social media because we really want as many people as possible to benefit from this webinar series. Just tune in for the one that you want or tune in the future. We've got loads of topics coming up and we really hope that you enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our trainer, our special expert. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that short video from Karenza. And as I said, my name's Carla Thomas. I work in Openreach and I'm the Director of Business Customer Service in Openreach. And effectively today, I'm going to be giving you this whistle-stop tour of personal brand and helping you to think about your personal brand. And actually, if you're running a small business, your business brand as well, because actually, that pretty much is you. I'll also talk about personal brand within a corporate environment, which is really where this work began. And I will look at how that brand reflects to customers also. So hopefully a whistle-stop tour that will be of interest to you. There'll be plenty of time for questions. And please feel free to ask me about any aspect of this. I may not be able to answer every question, but I'll absolutely do my best. So without further ado, I'll kick off. We're really comfortable from a very, very early age with the concept of brands, okay? I've heard it said that children as young as 18 months old, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your train of thought, recognise those golden arches and know exactly what that stands for. And brands are almost like personalities, if you like. They embody characteristics, and actually they're very carefully designed characteristics. And we, don't have a huge team of PR folks there for us managing our brand, but firms do, and they have to make absolutely sure that their brand characteristics match who they really are. And Marks and Spencer's, if I think about the characteristics that I would associate with Marks and Spencer's, I think safe pair of hands, they're never going to kind of win in the haute couture stakes, but they're definitely kind of where you'd go to buy your underwear, and they're very much a safe pair of hands. You think of them as a fairly quality orientated brand, and they kind of live it. And I've got a little anecdote that will kind of embody that, I guess. my middle daughter, when she was about 5 years old, she fell down the escalator in Marks and Spencer's, and immediately the staff all ran to help. They stopped the escalator. They sort of crowded round, called an ambulance just to check Matilda over, etc. And they actually took my number and called me the next day to check that she was okay. And from my perspective, they kind of absolutely lived their brand. They had a very quality approach. The more cynical amongst you could say it was kind of pure litigation avoidance, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like they had a genuine quality approach, that they were living, eating, sleeping, breathing their brand. And I was impressed. I kind of thought, yeah, they've got it nailed. And then there are other brands. So, you know, Burberry are an example of a brand that kind of went a bit wrong in the 1990s. They had kind of, you know, associations that they weren't that comfortable with. And anybody that remembers that kind of famous Burberry check became synonymous with a look that Burberry didn't really favour. Without saying too more, I'm old enough to remember it. Burberry's kind of got itself back into a position that I think it's comfortable with. But the point I'm making here is that brands can actually take quite a big hit fairly suddenly, and sometimes that can be for reasons that are entirely out of their control. So having a kind of strength of brand really matters. I think Burberry has probably been able to rescue itself because of the heritage and strength of that brand. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened? And I know that its profits took a hit, you know, at that particular point in the 90s. And then there are these kind of more modern brands, and I don't suppose these feel that modern anymore, but Innocent Smoothies started a kind of new way of thinking about brands, and much more of this real personality type thinking about a brand. You know, if you look at the side of you know, I know they've been sort of bought by Coca-Cola now, so it's not quite as authentic and real, but if you look at the side of an Innocent Smoothie packet, it's almost having a conversation with you like a friend. And it's become perhaps a bit jaded now, but it was very much a new way of brands engaging with their audience, with their customers effectively. And it suddenly became more real, more authentic, and more personality orientated than maybe the more reserved brands that we'd known before. So these firms all have teams of PR people working on their brands. You know, they have creatives that get together in a room and decide what they're going to stand for. And actually, you know, they are very carefully constructed. But actually, we also are a brand. Each and every one of us, in pretty much every environment in which we operate, we convey and carry a personal brand. And it's just as critical to us as we go out into life and into our working lives as actually it is for some of those big corporates that I've talked about. And just to kind of show you some of these characteristics that human beings carry with them, I'm going to look at some celebrities, and I'm trying to kind of look at the points here around authenticity of brand. So I'm sure that many of you recognise this chap. This is Wayne Rooney, and Wayne Rooney had been a really good example to me of a brand that's had its ups and downs. So he's clearly had an exceptionally sort of, you know, successful career as a footballer. I'm not a football fan, but I don't think anybody can take that away from him. But a proportion of any sports person's earnings comes from, you know, sponsorship, etc., and being able to gain revenues from advertising. And he was a very good role model. He had several children. He had a kind of, you know, a happy marriage to all intents and purposes. So a talented footballer and a family man, 3 children, 4th on the way, actually a really solid brand as a human being for advertising and sponsorship to kind of hang their hat on. And then kind of personal disaster struck, but perhaps of his own making. So I think he was caught with somebody else while his wife had just had their 4th child or something along those lines. He definitely was not living the brand that so much of his income was reliant upon. And the point I'm making here is not that you can't have to be perfect, you know, or any stretch of that really. This isn't about being pretend, but it's about you're going to get tripped up if you don't actually live authentically what you purport to live. And I'm sure his revenue, his income took a hit. He probably didn't notice it, but you and I might do if something similar had happened to us. So effectively, it's just authenticity is key with human brands. And another example here, this is a woman called Martha Stewart. Now, she's very successful and popular in the United States. She built an entire career in the 80s and into the 90s on baking cookies and creating a lovely home, all a bit saccharine, frankly. But it all came crashing down for her when she went to prison for an insider trading scandal in the 1990s. Prison uniform and baking cookies in a shaker-style kitchen didn't quite fit the brand. She's managed to build her entire brand in the US, but it's taken a lot of time, a lot of effort. And once more, her career took a real hit on the basis of her inauthenticity, if you like. You know, she didn't live what she purported to be. So there are people that you can look at and like them or loathe them. You can look at them and say, well, they kind of live and eat, sleep, breathe who they actually purport to be. And one of those is kind of Richard Branson, you know, very eccentric, founder of the Virgin brand, extols business principles and kind of lives them. I'm not so sure in 2020, and by golly, hasn't that been a year of change for all of us? But effectively, he's always been held up as somebody that fairly authentically lives his brand, like him or loathe him, for better or for worse. And when you look at brands, human characteristic brands, people effectively that are fairly successful, they tend to be fairly aligned in terms of who they purport to be and what their brand would say about them and who they actually are. And within those confines, it doesn't necessarily matter whether they're likable or whether they're, you know, a brand that you'd look at and say they're great. Actually, what matters more in terms of getting tripped up is that they're authentic and they are who they purport to be. So you may hate Richard Branson, but effectively, you know, he kind of lives who he is, really. So thinking about your own experiences, you know, in a work environment or in a friendship or university group, you've got to think about what are people perceiving about you? And I think you probably can just see this, you know, if you're going for it, I work in a corporate environment, right? And if I was going for a promotion in any area of this environment, I absolutely know that the hiring manager would do their best to find somebody that knows me. And as soon as they found somebody that knows me and has worked with me, they'd ask the question, what do you think about Carla? What's she like? And that person then suddenly has real importance in my life, or it could be several people. They have real importance in my life because they are going to give their perception of me. Now, that isn't something hopefully that they make up unless they're particularly malicious. That's something that I've given to them during my career. Okay. So that's the brands that actually precedes me and the brands that I've left behind me. So the work that I've done with them. And we do it all the time, right? People show characteristics and we judge them based on those characteristics. In a customer environment, you know, actually, if I go out to a customer environment, which I do all the time, that's part of my job, and I'm disorganized and it's the first time I've met that customer, that's really going to resonate with them. And they're going to be thinking, I'm not sure I want Carla involved because Carla's really disorganized. And these are the small cues that we're giving out all the time that kind of make and have the potential to really edify our careers and our businesses and the impressions that we give, but also equally have the potential to be detrimental to those experiences. And actually, you know, coming to what 2020's been like, it's been really hard this year. I've been working from home for most of the year. I've got 3 children. They've been running into the study on a regular basis, and keeping my brand as I'd want to keep it has actually become difficult. But it's become much more authentic and much more real of me as the whole person. And so, you know, I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. I'm accepting what I am. So just think about, what impressions do you give to others as you go through life? How are you known, do you think? And what is your current brand? So here are some folks with their associated brands. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be sort of negative about all of these, but we've got Mr. Flaky, Ms. Helpful, and Ms. Forgetful here. So, and I'm Ms. Tech Savvy, of course, that's me. So basically, when you think about your brand and just thinking about what I've said so far, I've talked about brands and I've talked about corporations. Your brand reflects who you are. Your brand comes before you because people will actively go out and try and find what you're all about. And in a small business environment, that could be kind of word of mouth, right? You know, I see it on Facebook all the time. I'm a member of loads of community groups. People are always saying, does anybody know a local marketing company for my business? Does anybody know a local, I don't know, even carpentry, or et cetera, et cetera. So definitely those brands that stick out are the ones that are going to be mentioned. It precedes you. And it's definitely got to be strong and authentic, because just like Martha Stewart and Wayne Rooney, if it's not a true authentic reflection of who you are and what you stand for, it'll actually let you down. So hopefully I'm getting to grips with these clickers. Right. So I've talked about corporations. I've talked about human beings. And now I'm going to talk about you. In a corporate environment, taking control of your brand, and this is in a corporate environment or a small business environment, taking control of your brands can really make a difference. In a smaller business, it can define how your customers view you. And like I said, it comes before you. In every environment, it can help you progress in your career and business, and it can get you access to new and exciting work, and it can take you to places that you hadn't even thought of. But what is it? So what I'm going to do now is a little exercise to help you get to grips with your personal brand and help you really think about what it is that you're putting out there. So hopefully this will take me to the next slide. Okay, it's very, very simple. There is nothing difficult about personal brand. It is fundamentally who you are, what you can offer. And then the real thing is that you have to demonstrate that through everything that you do. Okay, so actually getting it right will enable you to send a clear message about who you are. But first of all, you've got to think about who you are and what you can offer. And then I'll help you think about how you demonstrate that through everything that you do. So this is the exercise. So first of all, and this is an exercise that I can't ask you to do while we're in this session, but I would like you to do when the session's over. And it's cool. I call it automatic writing, okay? But there's nothing difficult about it. Take a piece of A4 paper and write down these 4 questions. What do I stand for? What do I want to be? Am I making a difference? And what do I offer? Okay. And don't sanitize your thoughts. So what I mean by that is take the A4 paper, write the 4 questions down, and actually then just write lots and lots of words. Just write everything that comes into your head and try not to sanitize your thoughts. Okay. So what do I stand for? What do I want to be? Am I making a difference? And what do I offer? And I typically carry out this exercise certainly every time I move into a new role. And if I haven't moved into a new role, I would carry this exercise out perhaps every 3 or 4 years. And I try and be really brutal with myself in terms of answering those questions. And really, it ends up telling me who I am and what I stand for. And the reason I go back to it is because I change. People change. We don't stay the same. I'm a very different person to the person that I was in my 20s. So they're the characteristics. Once I've got this right, I condense it into kind of like a 2-minute message. So I've got this page of A4 and I just keep condensing it and condensing it and condensing it into a 2-minute message. And that's the real essence of my personal brand. Okay. So I'm going to actually kind of like do this on myself, and I'm going out on a limb here, right? But this is my personal brand. Okay. So when I think about what do I stand for? I stand for fairness, honesty, hard work. I'm from a kind of, a mining family in the Midlands. Hard work is kind of in the blood, as is honesty and fairness. My father's family owned a sort of row of small shops in a very small community. So there's a very commercial edge to how I've grown up. And I always like watch the costs. It's kind of in my blood. So that's kind of what I stand for, specifically in a business environment. And what I want to be, well, I want to be passionate about what I do, right? I want to enjoy my work and I want to enable others to do the same. If I'm not sort of passionate and my curiosity isn't piqued, then I'm not in a very, very good place. So I want to understand things. I want to get underneath things. Do I make a difference? I think through my honesty and kind of unveiling of honesty, I really do make a difference. And I think that the fact that I'm very nosy, if you like, and want to get in underneath stuff, that really does make a big difference. And then actually, what do I offer? Passion, creativity, and this real openness. So really, that's kind of my 2-minute message, but that's just a series of kind of characteristics on a page. If I was then going to sort of turn that into what's brand Carla Thomas, it's very much that I'm open, honest, passionate, creative, really wanting to learn and passing on that knowledge. That's how I want people to think of me, because authentically, that's what I bring to the table. Now, there are things that this tells me about myself, right? And when you do this activity, there are things that it should sort of tell you about yourself. I'm not the sort of person that you should put in front of a load of spreadsheets in a darkened room. That's likely to make me feel quite ill, right? That's not going to prompt my creativity. So these are the things that kind of warm me up and bring out the best in me. And if I was going to convey a brand statement, these are my brands. And that's my 2-minute message, really, who I am and what I stand for. And once you've got this clicked with yourself, it depends what you're doing, right? You will look at this and think, does my brand fit what I'm doing, right? Because if I was an accountant right now, and I'm not, but if I was an accountant right now, these are probably exactly the characteristics that you might not want in an account. You might want creative, passionate accounting, but you might be much more impressed by somebody that's very diligent and has a very strong attention to detail, which I don't. So once you've got this 2-minute message of yourself, kind of compare it to what you're doing and the kind of market that you're in, because it actually can make a really big difference. I've gone through this with people in a mentoring relationship, and they've realized that they're in the wrong job, and that they're kind of like hindering elements of themselves because their person, because of the work that they're doing. So ask yourself at the end of it, are you in the right job? But more importantly, ask yourself, what is this personal brand? What do I stand for? What do I need to be conveying? And once you've got to grips with your brand and you've asked yourself those questions, it's a case of asking yourself, like, how do I kind of get that out there? How do I make sure that I'm, representing it? And that brings the question of what does show your brand. So once you've defined what it is, you've got to then think about how you represent it. And this is the kind of unfortunate bit of news, really, because in every bit of an environment that I'm in, from a working perspective, I'm kind of representing my brand. Every time I meet a new customer, I'm representing my brand. Every time I'm in a meeting, I'm representing my brand. Every time I'm presenting, I'm representing my brand. Pretty much everything I do, even every time I answer the phone, it's a representative. And it could be the person that 3 years down the line is going to be interviewing me for my dream job, right? And I don't want to have to be aware of that all the time, but it's worth me being aware of that all the time. And I'm going to show you some reasons why. I'm going to show you some emails that have been sent to me and just what that brand impression is. So every call, every meeting that you might attend, every presentation, every task, every job that you go out and do, every email, unfortunately, and the line between career and home is now blurred more than ever. And social networking can have a really big effect on your brands overall. Depends on the work you're doing. But actually, there are some terrible stats with regard to how many employers look up individuals on social media before they would bring them into an interview. And if what you've got on social media is, I don't know, non-palatable for the culture of that business, you're going to struggle. So unfortunately, the bad news is that pretty much everything has the ability to edify, help, or hinder your brand. But remember, it's not about superficiality and it's not about being perfect. It's about being who you are authentically. So hopefully, I've been really open about the fact that I'm not a detail person. The benefits that you get from who I am and what I stand for are the benefits you get from me, from brand Carla Thomas, right? You're not going to get in that package this person with minute attention to detail. That's just not going to happen. So if I pretended that I was Carla Thomas with minute attention to detail, I would very quickly fall over because I wouldn't be able to get all of these things right. Definitely some of the tasks I worked on would let me down. I hope everybody's with me so far. So Unfortunately, you've had the bad news. And I've just got these images of meetings because this woman just struck me as looking quite terse in the meeting environment. And I thought, I don't really know if I'd want to work with her or what brand image she'd be conveying to me. And then superficiality does have a part to play. And if I'm in a sales environment, I very much have to look the part. And if I'm in an academic environment, I probably need to look the part there too. So there is an element of superficiality, and that's in terms of how one turns up. Although I think that thankfully that's becoming less and less as time goes on, and people are becoming much less snobbish, if you like, in terms of the clothing that people wear, because frankly, why should it matter? Okay, so I will let this go at its own pace because I think, right, okay. I said I'd show you some examples of how people live or otherwise their brands in terms of, now these were two individual emails that I genuinely got many years ago. And both of these individuals were looking for a job in my organization. Okay. So the one on the left, fairly succinct email. Is there any news on the CV I sent you last week? I've been matched to another job, but would be really interested in trying something different and hope there may be something within your part of the business available for me. It's just a nice email. It's fairly gentle. They show a positivity towards the role, etc. And then on the right is another email for exactly the same role within the organization. And it said, I sent a CV over on the 23rd, haven't heard anything and wanted to know when I would hear. I'm not sure if service operational, that wasn't the unit, is the right place for me, but will put forward for the job if there is one. Tar. So first of all, they got my name and my sex therefore wrong, which, I'm not going to hold it against them. Secondly, they hadn't checked the email. And it doesn't take much to just check an email, especially if what you're looking for is a job. I interviewed both candidates, right? I didn't hold it against either candidate, but one of them definitely gave me a different perception of who they were and what they stood for than the other. And given my own lack of detail, I always need to hire people that have very strong attention to detail. So the person on the right was kind of letting themselves down in some respects, and actually didn't put the effort into making the right impression with me. So everything demonstrates your brand, unfortunately. Presentations that you may do, opportunities that you get to speak, any kind of CV that you put together, you would have to consider as the shop window for your brand. And when I've been mentoring people, sometimes I've talked to them about using their 2-minute message as their kind of personal statement at the top of the CV, and then actually looking at how they build the opportunities the experience that they have to line up with that, who they are and what they stand for. So it's very good to think about your brand from a CV writing perspective. And actually in a interview environment as well, it can be really good to kind of introduce who you are and what you stand for very early on in the interview, and then build everything around it. But the other thing that I was going to say is, once you've got to grips with your brand and you know who you are and what you want to stand for, what you stand for out there, you can actually look for opportunities to get involved in stuff that allows you to demonstrate that. Stuff like thought leadership, stuff like presenting to the right folks. I'll give you an example. I've often volunteered to speak about customers and customer environments because, I love working with customers. That's pretty much what I've done in my career. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of get creative and get some creative messages out there to groups of people that don't typically work with customers. And it allows me to build my career and kind of drive that thought leadership around the customer environment. So that's my personal example. I'm sure you will have examples where you can use your brand to that kind of effect. And don't miss those opportunities. The next thing that I'm going to show you is just some work that people have put in front of me, right? And we all produce manuscripts, documents, invoices, various bits of work that we, written work that we put in front of people all the time. And this was a weekly dashboard that somebody put in front of me. And I kind of felt a bit sick when I saw it, right? I'll be completely honest. It was like there was nothing that told me whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether it was indifferent. And the person just let themselves down. And I'll let you into a little secret. Years ago, the thing that got me into personal brand, and it was about 15 years ago, I saw a piece. I was a kind of a lowly manager, like just sort of getting to grips with a big program of work to help the NHS. And we'd had a consultancy piece of work done by a third-party consultant. It was very slick. It was very impressive. And one of our general managers, who was kind of God to me at the time in terms of where they sat in the organisation, had put a response back to this third-party consultancy. And I saw it. I saw the response. And it was terrible. I was ashamed. It was really poor. It had different fonts all over it. The narrative was everywhere. It didn't really sort of tell any kind of cohesive message in terms of, or coherent message even. It didn't gel. There were lots of different kind of formatting elements. And it was kind of like a response to kind of one of the slickest consultants that I know. So I felt a bit embarrassed, really, that was the kind of the representation of both that particular manager's brand, because it was. He left the business a long time ago, right? So, and I'm not naming him, so I don't feel guilty talking about this, but also the corporate brand that I was in at the time. And it got me thinking really about this impact of everything you do and how it impacts the environment that you're in and your own career. So just to let you into it, this particular piece of work isn't that, but this was a piece of work that I would call not so wow work. Somebody put it in front of me and I said, well, this really doesn't tell me anything. And then when I look at the sort of next one, this isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just a much better way of showing me an update. And actually, this person has taken the time to think about what I'm all about, and they've made the update. It's a bit wordy possibly, but they've made the update quite kind of, orientated around the root causes. There's an element of the creativity, the problem statement. They've put little icons in it. It just looks so much better than the previous piece of work. So don't forget that everything you produce, whether it's invoices, whether it's quotes, whether it's documents, whatever it is, it has an impact on how people perceive you. And 3 years or 5 years from now, somebody could be asking about that perception. So you've really got the opportunity to make sure it's the right one. So if I move on, and we're nearly there now, okay, I would be totally doing you a disservice if I really didn't mention online presence. And 15 years ago, when I first built a kind of a research project into personal brand, it didn't include anything about online at all. It was just kind of brand in the corporate environment. And of course, things have come on so far since then. And, there are some horror stories out there. There are people that have lost their jobs because of things that they've put on social media. Apparently, as of 2017, 70% of employers were in one way or another checking social media around their employees. I'm genuinely not sure where people find the time to do that. But yeah, basically, everything you do, unless you're brilliant with your privacy, and of course you can do what you like if you're brilliant with your privacy. And I remember I just was able to kind of Google search kind of drunken young man, and people's Facebook images would come up. And it's sort of like, actually, if you're going for an interview and the person's going to look you up, it's probably best you've not got, and everybody goes out and enjoys themselves, but don't fall foul of social media sufficient that all of the work you do on your personal brand in your work environment is damaged because of stuff that you've put on your social media. I wish that these things didn't matter, but these things do matter. And I think the only question that I'd get you to ask yourself is, would I want to read this post on front of national newspapers every day for the rest of my life? And if you wouldn't want to read that post on the front of the national newspapers every day for the rest of your life, I'm not saying don't post it. I'm saying think twice about posting it, because unfortunately, more and more that line between who we are in our personal lives and who we are in our working lives is blurred, right? So if I move on, I'm at the summary point now, right? So personal brands is actually real and authentic. If you try and pretend to be something you're not, you will get tripped up and you will be found out almost certainly. We sense in authenticity, we know it. So it's about who you are and what you stand for, okay? And actually, it can be a representation of a wider brand. in my particular environment, I am a representation of the Openreach brand. And a lot of the stuff that I would do, I have to really think about with regard to that representation. It's now incredibly out there, and everything you do on social media could have an impact on that brand. But not just what you do on social media, okay? Everything that you do, it's not a facade, but every call, every quote, every piece of work you submit, every PowerPoint presentation, pretty much everything you do has the potential to sort of add to that brand or damage that brand. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be authentic to who you are and what you stand for. Okay, because those things all demonstrate who you are and what you stand for. And if, like me, you have a lack of attention to detail, that's fine. Maybe you can allow that to come through because that's authentic. But if you're going for a job as an accountant, that possibly isn't going to help you too much. And on the social media front, one of the things that I do, unfortunately, my name's Carla Thomas, and I've got the same name as a soul singer from the 1960s. I don't know whether my parents did that on purpose. I haven't asked them, or whether that was just coincidence. But effectively, if I Google myself, I just get Carla Thomas, the soul singer. But Google your neighbour or Google yourself, okay? Perhaps Googling your neighbour is a bit stalky. And actually make some judgments about what social media is saying about you, okay? Because if it's saying stuff you don't want, then you've got some work to do. And the other thing that I do with regard to how I come across outside of social media is that periodically I ask 5 people that I work with to kind of just fill in a little questionnaire. And this isn't being narcissistic or anything like that, right? It's just trying to get to grips with, am I coming across in the way that I want to come across in terms of my personal brand? So I get 5 honest people to tell me how they perceive me. Just give me words in terms of how they perceive me. And I get the same 5 honest people to tell me how they perceived me when they first met me. And if I'm getting my personal brand right, there should be a sort of high degree of similarity between how they perceived me when they first met me and how they perceive me now. And this isn't a scientific study, right? But this is getting to grips with, does it vaguely represent how I came across when they first met me and how I come across now? And sometimes it trips me up, right? I remember speaking to somebody a couple of years ago, and I'd been working with her for about 6 months. And I wanted to get to grips with how I came across to her, because we'd had some fairly troubling interactions where I felt like she was a little bit, she wasn't quite saying everything to me, or I suspected that. So I asked her to do that. How did you perceive me when you first met me, and how do you perceive me now? And she said that when she first met me, she perceived me to be quite short and terse. And she must have just got me on a bad day, right? Because I'm typically not short or terse. But that now that she knew me, she didn't think that at all, you know. So she thought I was friendly and warm, etc. But when she'd first met me, that was one of the things that she'd identified. And of course, that told me that I had work to do. Because if the message that I'm conveying to other people when they first meet me is that I'm short, short-tempered, if you like, or terse, that's not the impression. That doesn't fit with my personal brand statement. That's not how I want to be known. Now, I'm not perfect. And luckily, over time, she didn't think that about me anymore. But what about if I'd only met her once and 5 years later, she was making a decision about my career future? So, be authentic to who you are, but at the same time, think about your interactions with others. They all convey your brand for good or for bad. So I'm going to finish there, really. Personal brand is who you are and what you stand for. And it's a very whistle-stop tour. There are loads and loads of books that you can go out and do more work. I would absolutely recommend to do the little piece of work that I mentioned at the beginning, which is defining who you are and what you stand for, and getting that 2-minute message built and really becoming familiar with what you're all about. Look at the career that you're in, look at the work that you're in, and as long as they match, go out and use your brand really widely so that you can edify your working life and your career with it. And on that, I'm done. Are we going to open for Q&A now, or do I get to read the Q&A? I think I get to read these Q&A, and I don't know. Oh, we've got 2 questions, right. So If you have any questions, thanks for joining. No, there are no actual questions in here as far as I can see. I haven't missed any questions. If you have got any questions, if you can go to the Q&A in the app, you can ask those questions. If you don't have any questions, I'm perfectly fine with that. I won't take offense, but I'll give it a couple of minutes in case anybody does have any questions. We've got quite a few questions that have come through with regard to personal brands, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to answer them. So Elsa, thank you very much. And apologies, I'm looking at my phone for these questions. Is there any book that you'd suggest to go deeper into personal branding? Look, there are so many books out there. I would say go Google the books. It depends on what you're after, really, whether you want to go highly academic or idiot's guide. I prefer the latter. I've already told you my approach to detail, but I think it's horses for courses. I'm happy to share some. In fact, I might put some on my LinkedIn profile and share some, but it really depends on what you're looking for. And I think somebody else has asked that too. Any advice for employed persons if they need to change industry? I mean, first of all, right, we're in a very difficult economic environment, and I'd hate to think that you'd look at your personal brand and say, whoopee, I'm off, because, you know, it takes time to figure out what off might look like. So first of all, I would say don't rush into anything, especially in this economic environment. But once you check out your kit bag, okay, so you build your personal brand and then check out your kit bag. What skills do you have? How do they fit with your personal brand? And if you are then looking at a new career, there are lots of online resources that can help you think about the characteristics that you have and the careers that you might fit best into. Go and use them. And then slowly build towards that, right? I consistently study. I'm currently doing an MBA as a sort of part-time thing. I'm always studying and I never stop. And, you know, try and build some of that into your life and move into your new career. And by the way, good luck. Emily, you've asked about books. I've given my answer about that. Bridget, you've asked about being strict with COVID-19 and this results in putting customers off. I think actually there are ways that you can sell that, right? You being very strict with COVID-19 is very much you protecting your customers. So I think, you know, it's how you sell that message. It fits with your brand because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. You clearly want to protect your customers and yourself, and that's part of who you are and what you stand for. So don't shy away from it. I think you just can be very, very honest with your customers that you take this incredibly seriously. Try building that in and see if it makes a difference. Thank you, Carla. It was very helpful and engaging. Lack of questions didn't mean we weren't involved. Plenty of takeaways. I'm really glad. I feel really honoured to do this today. So thank you, Morgie, for letting me know that. That's really lovely. And thanks very much for a great session. I think I've answered all of the questions now. So thank you very much for your engagement today. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. And on that note, I think we now will close it down.